So today, I want to pick a topic that relates to Purim in the sense that Purim relates to the Beit HaMikdash. And if the Beit HaMikdash relates to the Mishkan, and the Mishkan relates to Har Sinai, then we have a connection. That's all. But everything in Chumash is connected to everything. So what I want to do today, we're going to be at a pivotal point. There's psukim, I think we've even seen them before, but these psukim set the stage for the rest of Chumash. So let me explain where we are. And source sheets. Did Rabbi, are they on the source?
Yeah. I'll get them up in a second. Yeah, I'm
Okay, you can
sorry. I
throw
just
them up
put them
again.
up because our person puts them is also having her perm suda now. So okay.
Okay. So we're gonna do like this. I have to do a bit of a review, but let me just share my source sheet with everybody. Here we are. Okay, it's class number 8 today, and are on Sefer Shemot. So in the previous shiurim, we discussed the events that happened in Mamad Har Sinai, how confusing they were. So we're going to try and understand how Har Sinai doesn't end, but it continues. And we're going to see after what we call Yitro Mishpatim, or chapters 19 to 24, which is a unit. We'll see why it's called a unit of Mamad Har Sinai. We're going to have a transition to more sections, but the whole chronology gets really confusing. There's a lot of famous arguments about them, but the goal today is to understand the reason for the confusion and how important that confusion is. Okay, so as we all know, Moshe goes up for 40 days and 40 nights. While Moshe is on Har Sinai for 40 days and 40 nights, we get the Am Yisrael sins with the sin of the golden calf, and Moshe Rabbeinu gets lots of laws. Which laws he receives on those first 40 days and 40 nights, that'll be our topic today. We're going to start that topic today. It'll keep us busy for the next couple of weeks. Okay. Last week we also saw we didn't only talk about Har Sinai, we talked about primarily the covenant in Har Sinai and the covenantal ceremony in the beginning of chapter 24 when we said Nasa V'Nishma, and the conclusion of last week's year, we gave a logical reason why Chazal put the beginning of chapter 24 back in chapter 19. I'm going to show you that in a minute, and then we'll get to work over here. So what I shared with you here, they were on the source sheet. Don't worry about this small little print here. I just wanted to show you what we did last week. Oh, my mistake. I'll make it really small. I have this page you can print out later on, but this takes chapter 19. To annotate for a second. Not that. There we go. Okay. This takes chapter 19, and each section I gave a letter. It goes in the order of chapter 19. This was what I call the proposition. When God says, do you want to be Mamlechet Koni V'lo Kadosh? And this section was called preparation for Har Sinai. Okay? And then 3 days of preparation with all and then we have revelation on the third day, and the people get scared. Moshe brings them back. And then the big pasuk, Vayikol Shofar Cholek V'chazek Mod, and Moshe would speak, and God would answer him. And Chazal put this pasuk being the last 8 dibrot. We talked about last week, 2 weeks ago, the first 2 dibrot are missing. Then we have these limitation psukim, which was very confusing, which we talked about last week also, where no one can look anymore. We basically nixed the idea that anyone can see God. Then we had the first 2 dibrot in first person, and the last 8 dibrot in third person. That's why we divided them. And then we had first story 1, which was the people begging Moshe Rabbeinu, we want you to do the talking. We don't want to hear from God. And the question was, where does this story go? And then we had Parshat Mishpatim, which was its own separate unit, which we have to give a shir on later on about just Parshat Mishpatim and that whole law section that comes. So just to review what we did before, is that this story of the people becoming fearful, Eben Ezra keeps it where it is. Because of the story in Sefer Devarim, which we'll probably have a chance to see today, Ramban takes this story and puts it, let me make a different marker here. I need an arrow. Here we go. Ramban takes this story and puts it here and said this story, a fear happened over here on the third day. On the third day when God began Yisid Galut, it explains why they take 3 steps back. And Chazal put it pretty much over here, in between F and G. This explains the difference from first person to third person. So again, this little story over here, H, can either be where it is, Eben Ezra, can be on day 3 before they got the 10 Commandments. Part of C, that's Ramban. And Chazal put it, I think Chizkuni brings it down in Rashi, that happens between the first two and the last date, and it's a footnote to the Dibrot. Okay, that was what we talked about, and that's why I gave you this page, what we call the cutouts. Now, let's get to the next page, and we have to get rid of all these drawings. If I share, no, we're still sharing. Here we go. Cutouts B, A to Z. Next one. No, that's not good. I need my arrow. No, that's not good. Why don't I have my mouse? Here we go. Oh no, that's the wrong one. Cutouts. Oh wait, 1 second. I have to download something real fast. I put the wrong page up. Give me a second. I have to unstop the share and open up Chumash cutouts. Okay, JZ. Okay, my mistake. Give me 1 second. Okay, now I have to share my screen. Okay, share screen. And we're back on. Sorry about all that. Share this one.
Moshe is going up and down like a yo-yo. Is Yehoshua with him all the time?
Okay, here we are now. Okay, we're good now. Okay, my screen should be good now. Then we had we talked about last week this area called K. If you look, and you can look on these and study them later on. This is the beginning of chapter 24, which had, that's not what we wanted. There we go. Okay. The beginning of chapter 4 was Nasa V'Nishma, good old 24/7. That's when we did that ceremony, and we claimed that this story happened really back in chapter 19. And today we're going to begin now with Moshe going up for the first 40 days. We call that El. And then we're going to identify this unit called the Mishkan unit, which we've been reading the last couple of weeks in Shul. Then we have the story of Chet Egel, and then putting the Mishkan together. And then this is a story from Sefer Devarim, which we'll deal with later on. Okay, that's called, I call that the cutouts. Now what we're going to do today, we're going to start right here. I'll try to keep it simple today. The story at the end of chapter 24, and to explain how pivotal it is. So let's get to work. I can stop the share, and now go back to my regular source sheet, which was actually right there. And here we are. Okay, so let's read. What did God tell Moshe Rabbeinu to do? Remember, we said Nasa V'Nishma, that's all over. According to everybody, this event happens after the Ten Commandments for sure. And we've seen these before, just we have to read this very carefully. But Yomer Hashem and Moshe, Alei Elai Yahara, go up the mountain, Ve'yeh Sham, and be there. Without a time, there's no time stamp here. It didn't say for how long to come up for. God summons Moshe to the mountain, come up the mountain, and be there. And while you're there, three things. You're going to get Luchot Even, we know what they are, the first Luchot, and the Torah and the Mitzvah, which we have to spend a lot of time trying to identify what they are. Some instruction book and some commandment. Then, Moshe goes up with Yeshua, and Moshe goes up the mountain. That's called Har Elohim, the other name for Chorev. Now, because he doesn't know how long he's going for, he tells the elders that if anything happens, Aaron and Hur are in charge. Therefore, they'll Kini Mamar. He tells the elders, the leaders of the people, of the different tribes, Fulan Bezeh, stay here at Har Sinai, until me and Yeshua return. If you have any questions, Aaron and Hur, I call them their babysitters in the meantime. Anyone with questions, go to them. Anything you might have come to me before, now go to Aaron and Hur, they'll take care of things. Notice Moshe doesn't tell Aaron and Hur how long he's going up for either. God doesn't tell Moshe. We'll see. Chumash tells the reader. We'll see that soon. Moshe goes up the mountain. These psukim will come back to us later for the Mishkan. The glory of the cloud of God's glory covered the mountain. Uchvod Hashem, Vayishkom Kvod Hashem Har Sinai, God's glory rested in Har Sinai, and the cloud covered the mountain for 6 days. And then God calls Moshe on the 7th day, and Moshe will go into the Anan, we'll see. To the people, Mark Kvod Hashem, this glory of God that the people saw, was like a burning fire, Kesh Ochelet Rosh Hahar. Remember the good old burning bush? Same type of description. And they the people saw a ball of fire, but with smoke and a big cloud. And Moshe goes into the Anan, goes up the mountain. And now Chumash tells the reader, Moshe is there for 40 days and 40 nights.
Where is Yoshua? Because he just left Yoshua dangling somewhere.
Okay, so Moshe didn't leave Yoshua dangling. The Psukim leave Yoshua dangling, correct?
Okay. Right.
And therefore, some people think that Yoshua is with Moshe 24/7 because it says Misharto, so he's there. It could be he's there watching, and it says later on they didn't eat or they didn't drink. Maybe it means they barely ate or drank. But is Yoshua, so some person say he's halfway up the mountain. He hears like a war going on in camp. We don't know where Yoshua is, but it's not critical for the story until we get to the story of Chet Egel, where Yoshua becomes important in the story.
But is there any reflection afterwards when Yoshua becomes a leader, the fact that he was like the closest or something?
That's why he's called Nar. A Nar. It doesn't mean he's young. A Nar means he's an apprentice. Yoshua Mishun Nar means an apprentice. Now, the people don't pick Yoshua as a leader. God decides that in the 40th year. It's not clear to everyone that Yoshua is going to take over. They wanted to stone Yoshua after in the story of the spies. We'll talk about Yoshua later on in his relationship with the people. Now, let's get to work. Before we do all the famous questions, I want to think just logically for a minute. Has God been testing the people up until now? Okay. Give me examples of God testing the people ever since we left Egypt.
Kriyat Yam Suf.
Okay, remember the people said, they think they're about to be killed, and God says, stand back and watch Yeshuat Hashem. Okay. Any other what's called Nisayon?
Mara, right after that, with the water.
Mara.
Yeah.
So basically, everything has been in Nisayon. That's my point.
Yeah, the food. No food.
What's the purpose of the Nisayon? The goal is not for the people to suffer, and this is key for understanding what's going to happen later on, I think. God is trying to train the people. They get them ready for their job to be God's nation. That takes training. And therefore, there's no point in conquering the land of Israel and setting up a nation if the people setting up the nation are not going to sanctify God. And therefore, there's no point in helping them conquer the land until they're ready, until they're educationally ready to become God's people. What I want to suggest is, in general, we're going to get to this over the next couple of weeks, that it's not that Moshe is coming down in 40 days and they have to wait. God is leaving Moshe on the mountain until something happens. God wants to see how the people are going to act without Moshe Rabbeinu himself present. That's the best way to test, if I give the yeshiva analogy, the best way to test your education of a student in yeshiva is what happens after they leave yeshiva. In yeshiva, when you're surrounded by, with the Rosh Yeshiva around, when your rabbis are around, that's one thing. If your education was complete, then even when the rabbi leaves or when you leave, your behavior will be better. That's going to be the question. How are they going to act? How are they going to act as a nation without Moshe? Because sooner or later, once you set up a nation and conquer the land, they're not going to have Moshe around 24/7. They're going to be scattered. Are the people ready yet to be God's people? I'm going to try and explain Chet Egel. The whole story is God is leaving Moshe Rabbeinu on Har Sinai until something happens. And that's why it's 40 days. It's not that because God tells Moshe, Lech Red, not because your 40 days are over, but go down because something's happening. God's leaving Moshe Rabbeinu on the mountain until something's going to happen down at the camp. Okay, but
what's the purpose of the 7-day wait? Leaving 33 days afterwards?
So that's a big argument. Moshe waiting for 7 days. Is that the 7th of Nisan? Is the cloud covering the mountain from Rosh Chodesh Nisan until the 7th, after the Dibrot, is the 7th day since Perek Yotet, since they arrived at Har Sinai? Or is Moshe waiting for 6-7 days just to go in, and almost like the 7 days of Miluim? There'll be a parallel between those 7 days and the 7 days of Miluim, for sure. We'll see later on. Now, in general, if there's a waiting time, if it's not 3 days or 7 days, that's the question. Because you never ask the question, how come he has to wait 7 days? If he's waiting, the question would be, why isn't it 7 days? It'll either be 7 days or 3 days of waiting. That's all through Chumash. And we're going to see a lot of what's called typological numbers. Again, 40 days can't be by chance either. That goes back to the flood. And all that. Yeah, Nikki?
Is that the 7 and the 3 times that the bride goes around the possibilities?
I'm assuming, I'm not sure who came up with that idea first, but I'm assuming if Chatan Kala is something with Har Sinai,
yeah,
I'm assuming the 7 days. I think it's more like Yericho, because you have to break down, because that's the in-laws walking around, isn't it?
No, Rav Soloveitchik was my Masada Kedushin, and he said you could go 7, 3, or not. Or
Okay.
0. So I'm wondering that if this is
Which means,
3.
I think that means he didn't take it. I think he meant it really doesn't make that much of a difference. You're just doing whatever your custom is.
Yeah, okay,
But I think the best
those
example for me is
particular numbers.
to break down the walls of Yericho. We had to walk around 7 times. So to break down the walls of families, being along with each other. It's not, the husband and father are fine. It's the parents have to learn to get along.
No, it was
Those-
the 7
those are-
3. It was the 3 that was interesting.
Yeah,
to
3 days is Har Sinai. 3 days is 3 and 7 go back to creation. Remember, there's three parallel to 3. Then day 7. Okay, what is there something that 3 always represents and 7 always represents? I'm not sure, but 7 always has to do with nature. Put it this way: 7 and Pru or Vu shouldn't surprise anybody. Correct? The Pru or Vu is central to creation story. And 7 is central to Shabbat. So the idea of Brit goes with 7. The idea of having children, which has a lot to do with marriage, goes with 7. And you need ritual. You follow. You need to do something symbolic. So it makes sense you do 7 times.
Can I
Now-
ask a question?
Yeah, sure, Dory.
You talked about the trials that they were put under, like the Nisyonot.
Yeah.
Seems to me, that like from any educational point of view, he didn't prepare them for that. He's just dumping them on
Okay,
all the Nisyonot. So I don't
I'm going to use your
understand.
question. I'm going to use your
No,
question.
What?
Yeah.
No, so I'm saying I don't understand that. That's not a nisayon. That's like trapping almost. I
Oh,
don't,
okay.
I don't understand
I'm
that.
going to use your question to explain something very fundamental. Okay. Your question is about what HaKadosh Baruch Hu is doing. You have a question on God. Okay.
Nachon.
Yeah.
That's right.
The only book that deals with that is Eov. It doesn't give you much of an answer other than
Yeah.
no, don't bother. What I'm going to try and understand is, why is Chumash telling us the story this way? Why is Chumash giving us a story? You can question why is God fair or isn't he fair? There's no chance this could have happened. Those are maybe theological questions about God. I'm saying now that Chumash explains the story of Har Sinai in this manner, what does it teach us about our relationship with God as a nation? When I study the stories, I'm trying to understand how can the story in Chumash, how Chumash talks about how we enter a covenant and how he trains us, what can we learn from that? What I want to show you is, I think the main message is going to be that our relationship with God is anchored in God's ability to be forgiving, because Chet Egel will say had to happen, just like the flood had to happen.
Why?
That's my point. In other words, the end game, when God declares his attributes of mercy, in contrast to attributes of din, that's going to create an eternal relationship between God and the people that's going to guide our history, that'll guide our davening. That's key. Now, why God did it in such a way, that's interesting, but I don't think it's critical. The main thing is, what does it teach us about the depth of our relationship with God? And therefore, what I'm going to focus on is not so much on what happened, but more on what's written. Because why does Chumash tell us the story in that way? What does it teach us about a relationship with God? It's not a book to read, sit back and say, I don't like what God did today, tomorrow. We have no idea all of God's what's considered fair, not fair. I'm just saying, now that this is a written story that we have, God gave us this written story to understand our future relationship with God. Not just here's what happened historically. Okay, so that's my approach to all those questions all the time. As there's the answer, Tzadik Hashem b'chol derachav, but doesn't mean, but we have to add a lot of things that aren't written to make it look right. But maybe that's true, but that's not our point. Our point is, you study the whole story. What's the bottom line message when the whole thing's over? And we'll see the bottom line message. We're going to have an eternal relationship with a second covenant with God's attributes of mercy, which are key for our existence. Okay, now let's get back to work with, so that's number one about why is Moshe up there for 40 days and 40 nights. Now, the other question is, logically, what should happen? What I want to try and show is that because we've entered a covenant to be a Mamlechet Kohen Kadosh, we entered a covenant to be a nation representing God, we're going to need three types, or maybe even four types of laws, but three general types of laws. I need laws that are going to guide my personal behavior because I'm an individual part of that covenant representing God. If I'm an Eved Hashem, if I'm not a consumer but an employee, if my essence is a Jew, I'm in the service of God, I need to know how that affects my personal behavior in my day-to-day life, how that affects my communal behavior in my society, and how that affects my national behavior. You with me? And we're going to find 3 times in Chumash where we have sets of laws that pretty much follow that pattern. Meaning we're going to find in Parshat Mishpatim, I don't think we did that yet in detail, if I'm not mistaken. We haven't done Parshat Mishpatim in detail, have we, in this series?
No.
Okay. We're going to find Parshat Mishpatim, the laws for society, a judicial system, basic laws of communal life, which are basic. Kedoshim Tiyu and Sefer Vayikra is going to be laws about individual behavior primarily. In both of them, we're going to follow pretty much the pattern of the 10 Commandments. And the laws in Sefer Devarim are going to be our national behavior as a nation serving God. In other words, we're going to find 3 different times in Chumash where we have presentations of laws. What I want to suggest is all those sections were given on Har Sinai on the first 40 days, before Moshe breaks through Luchot. Those are all the core sections of Chumash that guide our behavior. Everything else is going to be ritual, which is key to remember it's our job to be God's people. Now, we're going to have tons of rituals to remember what our job is as God's people. We'll have Otot and Britot and Tuman Tara, visiting the temple. There'll be lots of things to remember the covenant. But the core laws about our day-to-day life, how we have to behave, are going to be those 3 sections. And we're going to see it's only logical that those 3 sections were given on Har Sinai in the first 40 days. Why they're not recorded now, that we have to come and explain over the next couple of weeks. In other words, what Moshe is going to receive on Har Sinai is not what's Chumash is going to record now. And I have to try to explain why. So what we're going to do first, explain why it appears to be so confusing, and then we'll try to make sense out of the whole thing. But again, let me just summarize what my key point was. It only makes sense that Moshe should go up to Har Sinai to receive the remaining laws to fulfill the goal to be a Mamlechet Kohen Kadosh. We entered a covenant to be a nation representing God that deals with national behavior, communal behavior, individual behavior. It makes sense I should find sets of laws that guide that. I need an instruction book called Torah in Hebrew in all those 3 sections. I also need laws that are going to remind me of that commitment. We call that ritual or pulchan, whatever you want to call that. And we'll see how all those relate to the covenant in Har Sinai as well. But how Chumash records when the laws are given, how they're given, we're going to see that now as it develops. But Moshe going up for 40 days, or Moshe going up to Har Sinai to get more laws, has everything to do with the covenant. In other words, we entered a covenant to be a nation serving God. Moshe is going up to get more laws that are going to help fulfill that covenant, the goal of that covenant. Why God's leaving Moshe up for 40 days, that we have to discuss now with the story of Chet HaEgel. But now let's take a look in Chumash again and see what follows. I have to share with you a screen of what should happen. I'm going to talk about 2 cameras, or 2 drone cameras, maybe 2 types of cameras. There's one camera called a drone camera on Mount Sinai that's watching God and Moshe Rabbeinu, God, Moshe, and Yeshua on top of Mount Sinai. There's another camp camera down below in the camp with the people. And they're separate from each other. Now the question is, what cameras is Chumash going to follow? Now, if Moshe goes up to Har Sinai to receive Luchot Even, the Torah and the Mitzvah, and if the next psukim will be God talking to Moshe Rabbeinu on Har Sinai, my first assumption would be that what Moshe is going up to receive is what's written. In other words, let's look again. I'm going to open up a Chumash with that goes just with the Hebrew for a minute. If I look in Shemot Perach Avdalad, okay, let me make this smaller. If I look at Shemot Chavdalad, the first 11 psukim, this was the good old Nasa V'Nishma section. Remember when we said Nasa V'Nishma with Sefer Abrit? And that was the with that leadership group. That was the letter, I think that was K, I think we talked about in our cutouts. And then we just read this section when Moshe goes up for the first 40 days. And that's the end of, that's Perach Daled. Now, let's look at the next pasuk in Chumash, Perach Hey. The next pasuk is Vaydaber Hashem Moshe Lemor, Daber b'nei Yisrael v'chuli truma, . If I just leave Chumash alone, that's what Ramban's going to do. Leave it alone is perfect. Why? Moshe goes up to get Luchot Even and a Torah, an instruction book, and a commandment, HaMitzvah. What follows right away in Har Sinai? God speaks to Moshe Rabbeinu and tells him about collecting money to build a Mishkan. The first thing he tells him to build is an aron, an ark, and inside with a cover called the kaporet. And then, B'natate et kaporet al haron milamala, ve'al titen et haidut asher tenei lecha. The first thing he's commanded to do is to build an ark with a cover, and inside that ark, covered by the kaporet, to put the edut which he's going to give you. Moshe went up to get Luchot Even and the Torah and the Mitzvah. And therefore, Luchot Even is this. And these Luchot Even are going to be stored in a Mishkan. This Mishkan needs an instruction book, how to build it, and a commandment to do it. And everything here is a command. Vasita Shulchan. See the command. Vasita Menorot Zahav Tahor. We're going to see every single paragraph, every parshiah is going to begin with some verb la'asot, to do. Remember, the key verse here is Va'astu le'mikdash v'shachati b'tocham. Build for me a mikdash. That's a commandment. Build it. Everything I'm going to show you, the shape of the Mishkan and the shape of all its kelim, that's instructions. So if I'm looking for mitzvah in Torah, so I have Luchot Even, which he's going to receive, an instruction book, a commandment, Va'astu le'mikdash, and instructions of how to do it, as I show you, and then all the details that we're going to follow now. This, remember, every time God speaks, it always begins with some introduction, like Vaydaber Hashem Moshe Lemor. Right here, I need a quotation mark. We're going to see God's going to talk to Moshe Rabbeinu for like 6 chapters. We're going to follow what's inside. We're just going to do a quick scan of what's inside. We'll see it's exclusively the Mishkan. What do we have? God tells Moshe Rabbeinu first to collect money and build a mikdash, the aron that's going to hold the Luchot Even, then the Shulchan, which will be inside the Olam Moed, and the menorah. That's going to be chapter 25, and each one beginning with Vasita. Now we go to chapter 26, which is going to follow in order. Pretend you have a Tanakh open. Bet Mishkan Ta'aseh. Let me make this bigger now. Make a Mishkan, the 10 covers. Then we have the covering of the Mishkan, the canvas. And then we have the krashim, basita krashim, again, the verb, to build, to do. That's going to be the planks that hold it up, again, made out of wood, covered with gold. And then we need a curtain, a parochet, that's going to divide between the Kodesh and the Kodesh Kodeshim inside that tent. Basically, chapter 26 will be the tent itself. Chapter 27 will be outside the tent. Again, basita, mizbach atzei shitim. Remember, God's still talking to Moshe Rabbeinu. The outdoor mizbech, and the chatzer, the courtyard that has the mizbech inside of it, but it's all outdoors and open. And then the commandment to bring, we read this a couple of weeks ago, Parshat Tetzaveh, to bring Shem and Zayit, but still part of the same commandment to Moshe Rabbeinu. That Moshe has commanded people to bring Shem and Zayit. And then, the famous chapter 28, where bring Aaron closer, and then Va'asita Bigdei Kodesh Aaron Achicha, another commandment to do. And then Vasu et Ephod, commandment to do the Ephod, and Vasita Mishbetzet Zahav, Vasita Choshen, see that? Vasita all the big day kuna, Vasita Mel Ephod, Vasita Tzitz. And that's it for chapter 28, all the big day kuna. Again, God's still talking to Moshe Rabbeinu since chapter 25. And he continues in chapter 29, now that we have the garments of the high priest and the regular Kohanim, V'zesher ta'aseh lehem, here's what you do to them, to sanctify them, the 7 days of Miluim, to return the Kohanim into Kohanim. We dress them for 7 days. We have a trial run, putting the clothes on the Kohanim and practicing everything in the Mikdash and putting it together and assembling and disassembling. But there'll be what's called the 7 days of preparation, of inauguration. And then, after that's done, the Korban Tamid, V'zeh asher taseh ala mizbeach, here's what you do on the Mizbeach. the daily Korban Tamid, after the 7 days of Miluim, we have the Korban Tamid every day. That's the end of chapter 29. Then we get to chapter 30, and God's still talking to Moshe Rabbeinu, and the last thing he tells him is to make a Mizbach Torah. Why this is at the end, we'll dedicate a whole shir to that. But the structure, I'm just want to identify the unit itself. Up until basically all Parshat Truma Tetzaveh, up until here, it was once a year on Yom Kippur. We sprinkle blood on this Mizbach Torah, and now we have Purim Kippurim. We're Yotzei Shushan Purim now. Where's the word Purim hiding here? Here we got Purim right there. Because I'll talk about the connection between Purim and Kippurim. But God now finished talking to Moshe Rabbeinu.
Hi, honey.
He started in Perek Chafei.
Hi.
Now,
Can I call you? I'm listening to share. Can I give you in 15 minutes? Can I call you back? Okay, bye.
Okay. Now, notice even though
the Kiyor is not there, how come the Kiyor comes later? Why is there?
yeah, I have to dedicate a whole share to that.
Okay.
Why is the Mizbach Torah later? And now, even though the topic is still the Mishkan, there's another dibur. God tells Moshe Rabbeinu, Parshat Shkalim, Machzit Shekel, which we need. We'll see. We need the silver to build the Mishkan. Then God tells Moshe Rabbeinu, Vasite Kior Nachoshet. That's another kli, which is left out from before, that belonged in the Chatzer. And then God tells Moshe Rabbeinu how to make Shemen HaMishcha. Okay? And then Vasitot, and he gets the ingredients, Vasitotam Shemen Mishchat Kodesh. That's going to be the anointing oil. And then another dibur, God telling Moshe Rabbeinu how to make the Torah itself. Okay? And so what I'm showing you is, after Truma Tetzaveh, 6 chapters, I think, chapter 25 through the middle of 30, one dibur, God speaking to Moshe Rabbeinu one long time, and then for some reason, he speaks several short times. The first one being Machzit HaShekel, got it? Then we have the Kior, then we have Shemen HaMishcha, and then the Ktoret itself. Now, notice how many times God talks to Moshe Rabbeinu, starting in Parshat Kitisa, right here. Once, Machzit HaShekel. 2, the Kior. 3, the anointing oil. 4, the Ktoret itself. So we have 4 times so far. One big time, 4 times, but he continues now in Perek Lamed Aleph. Again, God talks to Moshe Rabbeinu. God tells Moshe Rabbeinu, again, another dibur, appointing Betzalel to build it. And then the famous one, the last one is going to be Vayom Hashem Moshe Lemor, after the Mishkan is done, V'ata daber b'nei Yisrael lemor, achat shabtai tishmoru, even though I commanded you to build the Mishkan, still you have to keep Shabbat, because it's an oath, it's a sign between me and you for all generations to know Ki ani Hashem mekadishchem. Remember, Shabbat will be a sign of the Brit of Har Sinai that Atem Tiyu Mamlechet Kohen Livgoi Kadosh. So it's just like the Mishkan will be, we'll see in a minute, the reminder of Har Sinai in the realm of space. Shabbat will be in the realm of time, and then keep Shabbat because Shabbat is no Brit. If you desecrate the Sabbath day, the consequences you're cut off from the covenant, better known as karet. Okay, and then we're supposed to work 6 days a week, the 10 Commandments. And then, but now we add punishment, death penalty, because it's covenantal. And then the famous V'shamru b'nei Yisrael Shabbat. We're going to summarize the commandment. Am Yisrael is commanded to keep Shabbat for all generations, to remember the eternal brit with God. All the keywords of covenant. B'nei Yisrael Tid Olam. To remember creation. Now that got created, but why God created and why He chose us. Again, we'll go back to these psukim later as well. And then after that's over, we pick up with the story of Chet HaEgel. Got that? So that was now, what we just saw in a nutshell, let me stop this share. Why did we just do that? Let me just go back now to my cutouts. Here we are, this one here.
Why does the style switch from Vayedaber to Vayomer? First,
Vayomer. Yeah. In general, 1 second, we have the wrong one here. Let me just summarize. I'll answer the question in 1 second. What we just saw was, here we go. We started this year with L. We started this year with Moshe went for 40 days and 40 nights, and I just identified M. Got it? Called the Mishkan. The letters came out nicely. Notice this unit over here, right? Just to say I just identified, I call it M or the Mishkan. That's chapters 25 through 31. Now, before I get to Asher's question, Almost every unit here begins with Vaidaber. One or two says Vayomer. In general, Dibor is a commandment, like usually a harsher statement. Usually a commandment comes with the Dibor, and a regular conversation is going to be a Vayomer. So usually it's a lighter type of speech or lighter type of communication. Like I'm speaking to you and I'm talking to you. That's usually the case. Does it work every single time? Most of the time it works that way. Now, the most important thing now is as follows. What would logic tell? Oh, one last thing. Altogether, God speaks to Moshe 7 times. Remember? 1 time in Trumat Tetzaveh and 6 short ones at the end. That's a total of 7. And the cutest thing is the 7th one is going to be Shabbat. Did you pay attention to that? And that would, for some reason, God speaking to Moshe Rabbeinu in this unit, in this M unit right here, God speaks 7 times to Moshe Rabbeinu in this unit. And the 7th time he speaks, the topic is Shabbat, which is a reminder of the 7 days of creation. That can't be by chance. Now, why Chumash does it that way? That's a great question. But it can't be by chance that in this unit, God speaks to Moshe 7 times, 1 long time, and 6 short times, and the 7th one being Shabbat, I think has to be meaningful. Again, when we do that unit inside, we'll discuss it more in detail. Now, what's important for me, I want to explain now what Ramban is going to do. Ramban's going to be bothered by, not even bothered, is going to point out why is the first topic right after Mamad Har Sinai, why is it the Mishkan? Let me stop the share. Ramban notices the obvious. Moshe is summoned to the mountain for 40 days, and that's our topic today. What's going on in the first 40 days? So just keep it simple. God calls Moshe up for the first 40 days, and if I say what you see is what you get, meaning, what did God tell Moshe Rabbeinu? What we find in Sefer Shemot. What do we find in Sefer Shemot? God tells Moshe all about the Mishkan and only about the Mishkan. Therefore, what's he claim? Why was Moshe summoned to the mountain for the first 40 days? To teach him the laws of the Mishkan. And therefore, what's the purpose of the Mishkan? To continue Har Sinai. In a nutshell, what God is telling Moshe Rabbeinu is that we're never going to leave Har Sinai because Har Sinai is our connection to God. We don't leave Har Sinai, we're going to take it with us. And therefore, the reason why the very first thing that Moshe Rabbeinu receives when he goes up for the first 40 days is not to leave Har Sinai, it's to take it with you. How does Am Yisrael take it with us? By building the Mishkan. Got it? And therefore the laws, once we have the Mishkan, God's going to continue to talk to Moshe Rabbeinu from the Mishkan. I'm going to read those psukim just one more time to show you inside, because Rabbi makes a big deal about it. Let's open up this one, I guess. If I go back to Sefer Shemot, Perek Chaf Hei, where are we? Here. But after you put on the kaporet, let me make this bigger. You put the kaporet on top of the aron from above. In the aron, you put the edut, which I'm giving you. I'm going to meet you, Moshe, there. I'm going to speak to you from on top of the kaporet between the 2 kruvim, which is on top of the aron. Everything I'm commanding Bnei Yisrael, I'll speak to you from there. So Rabban's going to explain in a minute what's the purpose of the Mishkan. Simply to continue Har Sinai and continue. But we got the 10 Commandments, probably Parshat Mishpatim, and now any more laws, God will talk from the Mishkan. Now let's stop the share here. Now that's as simple as could be, isn't it? And therefore, when Moshe went up, let's go back now and see the Torah and the Mitzvah. Where are we? Share. My main source sheet is this one. And here to the left. And wait a second. These guys are here. That's it. So when God tells Moshe, come up the mountain to give you Luchot Even and the Torah and the Mitzvah, it's exactly referring to that whole unit we just identified. And the Torah would be the instructions, and the Mitzvah would be the commandment. And Asher Katafti, Ramban's going to read like this. We'll see the Ramban in a minute. Luchot Even Asher Katafti, got it? And HaTorah VaMitzvah Lo Horotam. Ramban's bothered by this pasuk because it sounds like God's writing down the Torah and the Mitzvah as well, not just the Luchot. So Ramban reads Luchot Even that God's going to write, and the Torah, the mitzvah, which will be God's instruction to build. Now, almost all the other Parshim say something different. I'm going to give you a quick sampling of how the Parshanim deal with these three words here, these three things, to show you how confusing it is. Right? So what's the Torah and the mitzvah? Let's see Rashi. Luchot Even, Torah v'mitzvah shekatafti l'rotam. What's Rashi claim? Kol 613 mitzvot bichlal aseret dibrotem. All 613 laws are all extensions. Also, are extensions of the 10 dibrot. And Rabbeinu Sadia explained all these warnings based on every dibor. In other words, Rabbi Sadia goes through all the 613 and associates each one of the 613 with one of the 10 commandments. So basically, what's Rashi saying? What is Moshe Rabbeinu going up to get on Har Sinai? The entire Torah, everything, which goes hand in hand with the 10 commandments. Now, what Sforno says? What's the Torah? The Torah is a chelek hayuni b'mena. The Torah is going to be the what do you call it? Like how do you say iyuni? Iyun is like the depth, maybe the philosophy behind it. A mitzvah is what you have to do, basically how you have to think and what you have to do to remember your connection to God. Okay. Look what the Talmud Brachot says. Luchot elu aseret dibrot. Torah is Mikra. That's Chumash. I'm sorry. HaMitzvah is Mishnah. Asher katavti Nivim Uktuvim. Got it? Lahorotam is Gemara. Isn't that a beautiful midrash? We grew up with that, didn't we? The entire Torah, Bichtav, Torah Shebet, was all given to Moshe in the first 40 days. Now, do you understand why that can't be Pshat, Pshuto Shemikra? It doesn't fit historically, but philosophically, it's beautiful. Because what happens on the first 40 days is our connection to God, and therefore, later the Mishnah and the Gemara and all the Nevi'im, which are an extension of that idea, which take that concept of being a nation serving God, the Nevi'im's job is to make sure it goes in the right direction. They keep maintenance. Tuvim will be more explanation about our connection to God. The Mishnah is going to take the Torah Shebechtav and make it a practical guide for day-to-day life. And the Gemara is going to explain the Mishnah. But basically, everything is all stemming from what happened in the covenant that we make in Har Sinai. So in that sense, thematically, it's like saying the Avot kept the entire Torah, even though in Pshat they didn't. But because of God choosing the Avot, that led to Matan Torah. So therefore, thematically, we say in the Midrash that the Avot kept the entire Torah. The same thing. Moshe goes up for the first 40 days. He receives a set of laws, but those laws become the basis for all the rest of Torah Shebechtav and Torah Sheba'al Peh. Okay. Now then, that's the Agarat and Brachot. What's Ibn Ezra saying? He says he's making a big deal. Asher Katafti has to be referring to the 10 Commandments, and therefore, Torah Shebechtav v'mitzvah Torah Sheba'al Peh. Okay. Ki kol ha-mitzvot nitnu l'Moshe miSinai b'yamim b'shamad Har Sinai. Okay. So he quotes Chazal. No, he quotes what Chazal say. That's the Torah Shebechtav and Torah Sheba'al Peh. Remember the Torah Shebechtav, and ha-mitzvah is Torah Sheba'al Peh. And then he quotes, we'll see what he's quoting later from Devarim. Ulefi dati ki ha-Torah dibor rishon v'chamishi v'mitzvah ashmona Devarim. What's he saying? Who can tell me what he's saying? He's saying the Torah is commandment number 1 and number 5. And the other 8 is the mitzvah. Why? What's special about 1 and 5?
Yes. The connection. Sorry.
Yes.
They can be interpreted either as ben makom, ben makom, and ben
No, but even Lotisat Shem Lashavas, number 3 is also between God and man, so it's number 2.
No, but I think 1 and 5 are both.
But 1 and 5 are positive. What you have to do, they're positive. The other 8 are negative. Don't. Right? Lotisa. Shabbat is lotasech. Right? You can't do work on Shabbat.
Okay.
Got it? And then the last 5, lotitzach, they're all lows. So it's saying the commandments, what you can't do are the 8, and the Torah, which is what you should do, is the first one and the 5th. Kabeda Tavicha is positive. So I think that he's doing. But all I'm showing you is how everyone explains differently. Yeah. Now we get to Ramban. We saw Ramban says Getas Moshe Alei Hara. Okay. He says that goes back to the beginning of chapter 24. We'll come back later on. But We'll do that part later. Okay. Bishur Katuv. He was bothered by Asher Katafti. Ve'nelecha luchot even Asher Katafti. Got that? V'atar mitzvah lohorotam. That's what I showed you before. Hu kasherma b'mishneh Torah. He based it all in Sefer Dvarim, which we have to read now. Now, let me stop the share for a second. Actually, I'll just go back and review. What should happen at the end of chapter 24? We gave the 2-camera analogy. And the next unit in Sefer Shemot, what we just did was we went from chapters 25 to 31 and saw it was all about the Mishkan and that God talked to Moshe 7 times. And now we have to compare the story in Sefer Dvarim. We'll see that in a minute. And that'll take us, that'll finish everything up. Now, we'll do it Roman numeral 4 later on. We're going to see Ramban's approach. Okay, everyone have the source sheet now? Ramban's going to say the most simple thing, most basic thing. He says as follows: V'sod HaMishkan. What's the depth of the Mishkan? Shaya kavod asher shechan al Har Sinai, shochen elav benistar. Okay, Vaya Mishkan tamid im Yisrael kavod shinra elav Har Sinai. Ramban, in his explanation in the beginning of chapter 25, beginning of Parshat Truma, he's going to explain the basics, like the building blocks of Kabbalah. What's he saying? I'll explain. I'll stop this share for a second. The example of Nigle, something being open and appearing, Har Sinai is Nigle because God appeared to us in Har Sinai. God came down in fire, and we heard him speaking. How much we heard, what we understood, you could argue. But we heard noise coming from God. Did we understand his words? Did he speak directly to us or through Moshe to us? But Am Yisrael stood in Har Sinai and experienced what we call revelation. That's Nigle at its highest level. Now, even though that doesn't happen every day in your life, those big experiences, or like what's in Jewish history experience, those are, whoa, that's one big moment. But God is always present in our lives. He's always present in our history, even though he's not Nigle. That's called Nistar. So he's saying, what's the Mishkan all about? I need a symbol that even though we don't see God's presence 24/7, God's always present 24/7. And therefore, the same Kvod Hashem that was obvious to us at Har Sinai is Nistar, is hidden now in the Mishkan. And the Mishkan is screaming Nistar. In what way? What's this symbol of God in the Mishkan? What symbolizes God himself? What's our symbol of God?
The Kruvim. The Kruvim.
The Aron with the Kruvim on top, because that's where God's going to speak to Moshe from. Can anyone see it? No? What is it? It's covered.
No one can see it. Only the Kohen Gadol.
And you need kapara for that. That's one special day. But in general, it's hidden. It's covered. So the very architecture of the Mishkan is going to be one of the underlying messages of the Mishkan. We have a God that exists but can't be seen. And our connection to God is our covenant with God. But you need, on the one hand, God doesn't have any image, but I need some symbol that I can relate to. So I'm going to have a symbol of God. That symbol of God will focus on the covenant to be God's people, which is the 10 Commandments, the Luchot HaBrit. But because our God is hidden, the whole structure that represents God is going to be covered. And hence, the Mishkan is covered, and therefore there's so much detail to the covering itself. A covering on top of a covering, on top of a covering. We'll have a covering from all different types of material, we'll see, in different layers. In front of this symbol of God will be a Mizbeach. But in a Mizbeach, an altar, in front of something representing a God, that's classic, not just in Judaism, that's all ancient religions had that. Everyone had a symbol of God and an altar in front of it. We'll see that in the Chet HaEgel as well. That's not our Chiddush. That's every religion has that in ancient times. Our Chiddush is not the very idea of an altar in front of a symbol of God, but what symbolizes God to us and what we put on the altar. We'll see. Whereas the format is not uniquely Jewish, but the format is ancient Near Eastern culture. But our specific symbols of God, that'll be unique to Am Yisrael. And that's what we learn from. Okay, so that's the Ramban in a nutshell. And let me just show you, guys I gotta get started now, and the next people have to continue all this. Let me go back to my screen and show you what we're gonna do. Where are we? Back to here. Here we go. What do we have on? We have Mamad Har Sinai was this unit. Let me move this up here. We'll make a big deal about this drawing in a minute. But we have, oh, not good. We discussed Mamad Har Sinai, and now we just did the commandment to build a Mishkan. And Ramban makes a big deal about this connection here. This arrow, Ramban saying, why is the first set of laws right after Moshe was up for the first 40 days? Why is it exclusively the Mishkan and Sefer Shemot? Basically, because what is basically the Mishkan? It's a continuation of Mamad Har Sinai. Now, if you remember your, maybe usually from kindergarten we learn this. If you remember, get rid of that and move this down a little bit. Other than Ramban, almost everyone else holds that the sin of Chet HaEgel, change the color here for a second. Okay, we want orange, okay. Almost everyone else holds that this story, the sin of Chet HaEgel, was happening during the first 40 days. And the commandment to build the Mishkan was given after Chet HaEgel. Just let me stop my share for a second. Who just show of hands or whatever. Who learned that growing up from a young age? That the reason for the Mishkan is because of Chet HaEgel. That's like part of our culture. And almost all the Parshanim go in that direction. Almost all the commentators go in that direction, except for Ramban. Ramban wants to keep Chumash in order. Anyone know the main reason that leads Chazal to that conclusion? That the Mishkan had to be after Chet HaEgel?
They needed something concrete to look at, to connect to. They couldn't.
And there was God saw, because we had to have some physical symbol of God, that we need something physical to represent God. Ideally, we should. That's the classic answer, which I'm gonna try and argue with that altogether. But I'm going to show you is there'll be a need for a temple. The main question is going to be: is there a need for a portable temple before we go to Israel? But the idea of a temple, I want to prove to you. It'll take a week or two to do it. We'll have to do this next week. I want to prove to you that for sure we would have needed a temple no matter what. I'll prove it from Sefer Dvarim. I'll just introduce that today. But the question, remember, Rashi doesn't say everything that Dror just said. A lot of people say what Dror just said, that we need some physical symbol because of Chet HaEgel. But I'm going to prove to you that there's a need for a mikdash no matter what. There has to be one. The question that comes up is the need for a portable, temporary temple before we get to Israel. Ramban's going to hold, I need one right away no matter what. And other Parshim are going to say, I would have built something permanent, but the need for a portable one right away, immediately, and how we built it was because of Chet HaEgel. What's the anchor of that? There are too many parallels between the commandment to build the Mishkan and Chet HaEgel to say it can't be by chance. Because what does Aaron do? Aaron tells the people, give me your gold. They take the gold, the donations, they melt it down and build a symbol of God. What we call the Egel. Why pick an Egel? A whole different question. They build an altar in front of it. Remember? He builds an altar in front of the Egel. He says, Chag Lashem Machar. They bring Olot and Shlamim. The same thing we did in Har Sinai, and the same thing we're going to do in the Mishkan. Aaron's doing, when Moshe's up there for the first 40 days, he's doing the same thing. He's making a non-kosher Aaron or a kosher Egel. It just doesn't make sense that Aaron could be doing the exact same thing that God's commanding Moshe to do, but doing it wrong. It makes much more sense that the way that we build the Mishkan reflects the story of Chet HaEgel. Basically, we'll do these all in detail next week. There are too many parallels between the story of Chet HaEgel and the Mishkan to say it's by chance. Now, I want to end the share today by a quick read in Sefer Dvarim to show you why everyone agrees, other than Ramban, why almost everyone agrees that Moshe got something else on Har Sinai. Why? Because if Moshe didn't get the Mishkan on Har Sinai, what did he get? What Chazal are saying is almost absurd. Why? If I look at Chumash, what did Moshe receive on the first 40 days? Only the Mishkan. 6 chapters about the Mishkan, exclusively the Mishkan. Now, what did Chazal say? He got everything but the Mishkan. And that was what he did get is not written here. What he didn't get is written. You understand what Chazal was saying, basically? If I look at Chumash, Moshe goes up for the first 40 days. He got all Torah Shebichtav, whatever he got. All B'Sur Halach Moshe B'Sinai. He got everything that he should be getting, all the laws of Torah, except the Mishkan. What does Chumash record? Only the Mishkan. And what doesn't record? All the rest of Chumash. We find out later on. That's mind-boggling, isn't it? But that's what Rashi holds. And that's what almost all the Parshim hold except for Ramban. And we have to see why. The answer, I'll just real quickly, is Sefer Dvarim. We'll read a couple minutes in Sefer Dvarim, and we'll continue this next week. You'll see why. In Sefer Dvarim, I have a very similar story. I'll just open up a nice English Hebrew Chumash. Let's get a Shmot. That's not what I wanted. I wanted a nice Hebrew English Chumash. Here we go. That's better. Bible, Deuteronomy, chapter 5. Okay. Remember, in Sefer Shemot, we have the 10 Commandments. Moshe starts his speech, tells the people, listen to these laws I'm teaching you today. God made a brit with us in Chorev. God spoke panim b'fanim. And then we have the 10 Commandments. Remember? That goes till here. Lo tirzach, lo tachmod. God spoke all these things, wrote it down on 2 avanim. And when you heard God's voice, you all got scared. And let's pick up from here. God, the people tell Moshe Rabbeinu, Kraba Taushma, you go up and listen to everything that God's going to command us, and you tell us, and everything you say in God's name, B'Shemanu Basinu. Right after the 10 Commandments, we have a story, the people coming to Moshe saying, we don't want to hear from God, we want to hear from you. God hears what the people's request and says, that's a great idea, they should always fear me, and now we have to read carefully. Go tell the people, Lech emor lechem, shuvah lechem lo lechem. Go tell people, go back to your tents, and here's key. Vatapo morimadi, ata you now Moshe, stay here with me. Right after the 10 Commandments, assuming the first 40 days, because the people were going back to their tents. Vadabra elecha, I'm going to tell you, et kol ha-mitzvah v'chukim ha-mishpatim. I'll give you the commandment and the chukim ha-mishpatim, the statutes and the laws, which you have to teach them, asher tlamdem, and they'll keep in the land which you're going now to conquer. That's not the laws of the Mishkan. That's the laws we'll see of Sefer Dvarim. And keep these laws. Why? Because in chapter 6, how does it begin? What's coming up in this big speech, V'zot ha-mitzvah, and the chukim mishpatim, which God commanded me to teach you to keep in the land, to learn to fear God, etc. And therefore, all the laws in Sefer Dvarim, I'll just make the key statement. Moshe reviews now all the laws that he got on the first 40 days. He'll throw in some rebuke on the way, and some reminders. But the laws that Moshe teaches in Sefer Dvarim, according to Chumash, according to Moshe Rabbeinu, were given to him on the first 40 days, before Chet HaEgel. And those laws include HaMakom Asher Yivchar Hashem, they talk about a permanent temple, they talk about Olot and Shlamim, they talk about Aliyah L'Regel, Shlosh Pamim B'Shana, like we have back in Parshat Mishpatim. In other words, according to Chumash in Sefer Dvarim, the laws that Moshe teaches in Sefer Dvarim, he received on the first 40 days. They're so important, we'll see later, they get their own book. And Moshe, we'll see, has to teach those over and over again. And those laws that clearly were given on the first 40 days included the laws about building a permanent temple, HaMakom Asher Yivchar Hashem. So if I read Dvarim together with Sefer Shemot, what conclusion do I have to reach? That there always would have been a temple. Yaakov dreamt about it back in Sefer Bereshit. And Parshat Mishpatim talked about it already on the same day as Mamad Har Sinai. Remember, Bereshit Bikurim Admatcha Tavi Beit Hashem Elokecha. You bring your Bikurim to God's house. We have Aliyah L'Regel Shlosh Pamim B'Shana back before Chet HaEgel. In other words, there's a need for a temple. The question is, do I need a portable temple? Do I need something that they can take apart and travel with? So the question is going to be, is the need for a portable temple going to be because of Chet HaEgel? or even without Chet Egel, I would have had a portable temple anyhow. So what I'm going to show you, let me just go back to my drawing. I'll just give the background to it because we're over time. What I want to show you later on, over next week, is follows. It makes so much sense that it not been for Chet Egel, there'd be no reason to stay in the desert for more than a couple of weeks. All I need to do, I receive the Torah on Har Sinai, study it, go to the land of Israel, conquer the land, set up a nation, and keep the laws you just got. Have we been perfect? Like, have we passed the test of Chet Egel? Meaning, have we not gone wild at the party? We'll talk about Chet Egel next week. Had the people not sinned at the party that Aaron's going to make, Aaron's going to make a symbol of God and people are going to go wild. We'll see. God sees in the behavior of what Aaron does, the Chet Egel, not what Aaron does, how the people react to what Aaron does. He'll see that people aren't ready yet to be God's people. We have to negotiate a whole new contract. That's the rest of Sefer Shemot. But had we been goody-goodies, had nothing gone wrong at Har Sinai, Moshe would have come down, taught the laws. We could have gone straight to Israel, conquered the land, and built a permanent temple called Makom Asher Yivchar Hashem. Would we need Chatat and Hasham? If there's no Midat Rachamim, if there's no need for attributes of mercy, remember, if there's only Midat Adin and no Midat Rachamim, I wouldn't need a lot of the Korbanot. I would need a temple. I'd have a Lot and Shlamim. I'd have what I had at Har Sinai, but I wouldn't need the whole theme of what we call repentance and Shuvah. Again, we'll deal with that all in detail. What I'm trying to explain is that had it not been for Chet Egel, I wouldn't need the Mishkan that we have recorded here. The need for the specific Mishkan that we have, its portability, the sacrifices we bring there, and how we build it, that's the result of Chet Egel. Now, then the question comes up, if that's the case, why is Chumash taking a Mishkan that was given after Chet Egel and putting it out of place? That we have to explain already. What's called Ein Mukdam U'Muchar. Chumash purposely takes units that belong later and moves them earlier to teach you something. And that we have to see. In other words, we're going to see that we're going to try and prove that Chazal are right, that the Mishkan, the specific Mishkan that we're commanded, had been given after Chet Egel. But we have to give a reason, why did Chumash put it earlier, even though it belonged later? In other words, why is Chumash chronological? We're going to show that chronologically, Rashi's correct, that the Mishkan is after Chet Egel. But the reason why Chumash puts the Mishkan before Chet Egel is to highlight the connection of the temple and the Mishkan to Har Sinai. That's a little complicated for now, but I'll explain it much more in detail when we see everything inside. But what I'm trying to show you is once you understand Ein Mukdam U'Muchar, when you understand what it's about, Chumash purposely takes entire units and moves them around, does it over and over again, for thematic reasons. Because had Chumash been in order, and the Mishkan, as it is, would have been recorded after Chet Egel, then people would think, what? The only reason for the Mishkan is because of Chet Egel, and they would miss the connection between the Mishkan and Har Sinai. Ramban's right. I need a constant reminder of Har Sinai. I need a temple to remember Har Sinai. You can't live without a Mishkan like you can't live without a shul. You need a shul. You need you need some center of your community to build to be God's people. What type of shul I'm building, that may be affected because of what happened on the way. So we're going to see that it could be the reason why Chumash moves the whole unit of the Mishkan and juxtaposes to Har Sinai is to highlight the connection between the Mishkan and Har Sinai. Let me end with one little comment. In general, this happened if you know Ramat Beit Shemesh in Israel, a lot of places in Israel. Also, we're not talking about Toronto. Right? The community doesn't build a shul; the shul builds a community. Do I have Thornhill right, Rabbi J? Remember, you first build a shul, right, and the shul builds a community. The same, got the idea? In other words, Am Yisrael needs a project to become a nation. Now, the question: do I need to build a shul? Do I need to build? The Mishkan is building the nation, not the nation building the Mishkan. I need a building project to bring the nation back together again and get them back on the right track. Now, would I have needed that project even had we not seen with Chet Egel? Or do I need that project right away because of Chet Egel? Now, is the Mishkan going to be building a fractured nation, or is going to be building a growing nation. In other words, would I need that project to build a shul no matter what, or they need to build that mishkan because something went wrong? The idea of the portable one. There's the need for a temple for shul need for sure, but that's going to be central to being God's people. Just like a Jewish community needs a shul, the nation needs a mikdash. Got my point? That's what's key. But
which pasuk did you say shows that Moshe Rabbeinu received the entire Torah Sheba'al Peh, Torah Shebechtav, Nevi'im Kesuvim? Which pasuk did you quote?
that was the part that was the Gemara in Brachot. That wasn't a part. I'll show you what I'm talking about. Chazal say like this in here we are. Chazal say in Masechet Brachot, where is it? Everyone grows up with this one. Here, Brachot. It's the beginning of Masechet Brachot, so people get to it. Luchot are the 10 commandments. Torah, Mikra. What do you call it? I'm sorry, Mishnah. Sorry about that. The Mishnah, HaMitzvah is the Mishnah. Shekatavti Nivim Ktuvim. The Gemara. Everyone given to Moshe from Har Sinai. And then Ebenezer quotes the same thing, and he says, here, then he quotes the pasuk in Devarim. That's going to be in Devarim. That's chapter 5. Let me stop this share. The pasuk he was quoting was from Devarim. 1 second. Devarim. That didn't share, did it? Share Devarim. Here, back in chapter 5. How do you number the psukim in chapter 5? It depends on how you number the dibrot. Most Chumashim, this is verse 26 or 27. Here it's 27, usually it's 28. Go tell the people, go back to your tents. That's what they all quote. God tells Moshe, stay with me. I'll tell you all the mitzvah and the chukim shpatim you have to teach them to keep in the land. So Chazal will say this is the pasuk where Moshe gets everything. That's it. It's not pshat in Chumash, but it's pshat behind the midrash, and Moshe got everything on Har Sinai on the first 40 days. But Dvarim only records, what Moshe teaches in Sefer Dvarim. Okay, let me check the chat real fast. And not too much there. There's the sources. Okay, why nowadays the Torah is hidden in the ark? Okay, the idea of a parocha behind the Aron for sure is the same idea. We'll see later on the shul is a mini mikdash. So all the imagery you have in a mikdash, you have in a shul. That's why the mizbeach is a social hall. The kitchen, you can't have a shul without a kitchen. That's the mizbeach. And you have an Aron, you have a parochet, you study the Torah. You usually near Tamid, something like that, the shulchan. Okay. What about the idea that we needed to learn about Shuvah from the experience? Yeah. We'll get Noreen's your point. That'll be the next 2 weeks. And we'll see that it almost had to happen, but that was God. We'll say God won't expect us to be perfect. We have to learn how to perfect. But to appreciate midat rachamim, I have to start with midat hadin. We're going to see what they did in Chet Ego is totally understandable. That's like makes a lot of sense what they did wrong. The question is going to be why is God so angry, more than what did Bnei Yisrael do wrong. We were just having Malav Malka went a little wild, that's all. But we'll see that already next week when we do Chet Ego. Okay, I'll stop here. Okay, Rabbi, announcements?
Rabbi?
Yeah, sure.
2 points very quickly. One, to strengthen the argument, I think that even an earlier reference to the Beit HaMikdash, which is the whole end of Shirat Hayam, seems to be about building a Beit HaMikdash.
I'll hear your point. I'm gonna actually argue with that a little bit. What is the Mikdash in Shirat Hayam referring to our Mikdash? That's a good question. But Shirat Hayam is all about military victory. I'll get in trouble with this. We'll do this next week though. We're gonna see, but I want to prove it to you next week. Chet Ego, in other words, the people go to Aaron, they're not looking for another God. They believe in God. They want a God who's going to win their wars. Shirat Hayam is all about winning wars. Just read it line by line. Every line is about winning war. Look what we did to the Egyptians, what we're going to do to the Canaanites. But the question is not going to be about winning wars. Of course, you have to win a war and you have to fight. Hashem Yishmer Chama. But Hashem is also Hashem Tzvot. It's not just Hashem Yishmer Chama.
But my
Yeah.
my second issue is if we find out that if God knows after his ego that we can't go to every Israel, why did he wait to tell us about it until after the case Meraglim?
No. So two things. One is the Chet Egel only holds us off for a year, for half a year to go to Israel. Chet Ramab is going to put it for the need. We should have gone to Israel right away anyhow. Saying had not been for Chet Egel, we would have gone right away. After Chet Egel, we need a half-year building project to build the nation together and travel with the Mishkan because it's going to take a longer time now. But that first generation should have gone in still. After Chet HaMeraglim, God says He's had it with that generation, and everything's put on hold for another generation. That'll be two different steps. We'll have to see those all those tefillot there. Bottom line, something went wrong with the first generation, which will be a topic in one of the Haggadah Shiurim that Jay's going to talk about now. Rabbi?
Okay, yes, thank you. Okay, 2 weeks today, as I mentioned at the beginning, we'll have our Haggadah Yom Iyun, going through the Haggadah more or less from beginning to end, obviously not the entire Haggadah. That'll be on, please God, 2 weeks today, March 30th, and then beginning March 31st, we'll have pretty much for 11 and 1 every day. We'll have shiurim on Pesach and leading, up till right before Pesach. And some of the regular shiurim will continue, but we'll send you out all the schedules. And this week we have a regular schedule. As I mentioned, Mark Shapiro is not speaking the next 2 weeks. But other than that, I think everything's on as usual. So please invite a friend and hope the Purim spirit lasts. Misha nichnas adar marbi b'simcha, as Rashi says, lasts till after Pesach, because we're happy because of Purim and Pesach. So let's hope that there'll be simcha v'sason v'ikar and or v'simcha and all good things. And okay, everybody, be well. Look forward to learning with you and your friends. And have a great day. As the weather improves, enjoy the spring or soon coming to Chodesh Aviv. So
Thank you, Rabbi Leibtag.
Hey, thank you. Thanks. Bye-bye.
okay, bye-bye, everybody. Have a good day.
Thank you. Bye.